still be able to connect properly and not blow out anybody's eardrums in the process. Okay, guys, I know been a lot of excitement today in our country, so we'll see who decides if they want to join me this evening. That'd be lovely. So as you guys jump on board, let me make sure things are all connected here. If you're watching the replay, I would love to know and hear from you. So if you don't mind, if you're watching the replay, go ahead and put replay in the comment section. I'm streaming tonight both to my YouTube Cozy Talks channel as well as my Facebook Cozy Talks channel. So you can now catch me on both platforms at the same time, which is kind of cool. That's something I've been trying to get up and running just because I know there's a lot of people who don't really like being on Facebook to watch shows. So I'm trying to kind of expand a little bit that way. Oh, goody, we have some comments flying in. Thank you. Okay, we got Brian Bishop, Steven, Jody sounds good. Okay, good. You guys can hear me. Tisha, hi, Tisha. I haven't seen you here in a while. We've got Trent on board. Howdy, Ashley. And Mark says, look, it's Cozy B, PT therapist. Mark, who are you expecting? Hey, Jim from St. Louis. Damon, what's going on, guys? Thank you guys for joining me this evening. I know that today is a very interesting and exciting day for our nation. So I appreciate y'all taking a little time out to come hang out with me this evening. Aw, Lena, girl, you're my favorite superstar, girl. You're the superstar here. We got Mark on board with Pat Glover. Pat, I got all those messages and pictures from you. So looking forward to chatting with you sometime soon. Tomorrow, I think. Diana, good to see you. Guys, we've got a lot of people popping on board. So guys, a lot of changes happening on Cozy Talks. A little bit of a later start to 2021 just because, 2020 was a little crazy. But some really exciting things coming down the pike. I've been filming all day today, so I'm a little loopy, as you can probably see from my previous video that I posted. I posted a little bloopers video of my filming today. But filming a lot of new things for my YouTube channel that I'm really, really excited about. And I'll share some of that with you guys later on this evening. Kristen, guys, I got to give a shout out here. My behind the scenes, I had this beautiful, amazing, talented woman named Kristen. And Kristen, she brings my Cozy Talk show to life. She is managing my YouTube channel. She helps me keep things together with Instagram and Facebook. The beautiful e-blasts that she puts together. I write them and then she makes them look pretty and she makes them look beautiful. And she's done just some wonderful things to help me bring this show to the next level and be able to expand this platform. And for Christmas, she got me this, I call it the fancy schmancy microphone set. So Kristen, girl, love you, girl. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Rhonda, what's going on? Mark, what's going on? We got Bonnie on board, Tom McIntyre. Oh, we got a lot of people. Johnny V, there's my Johnny V. Oh, so glad you're here with me. Oh, we got ourselves somebody from down under. We got John Challen from Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. Thank you for joining us, John. I know it's quite a bit of ways in time difference there, and I'm actually speaking to a group in Australia. I think next week I'll be speaking to a group in Australia. So I'm kind of excited to kind of expand just a little bit here. We got Kenny Jones from Chesapeake, Virginia. Guys, also just to kind of keep reminding you, I am, Kristen, you crack me up. I am also broadcasting from my YouTube channel. So if any of you prefer to, watch from YouTube, you can go to my Cozy Talks YouTube channel. Please consider subscribing, trying to get those subscription numbers up so that we can keep expanding this platform. We got Molly on board. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We got a nice crew on board. Feel free to tag people during the show to have them join in with us. For those of you joining me for the first time, welcome. My name is Cozy Belloso. I'm a physical therapist, amputee specialist here in Tampa, Florida. I've been a PT for 18 years. I have my own clinic here that's exclusively for working with amputees. And this is my show. So, hey, Doug, glad you could join us. We got Sandra on board and we got Jennifer Lynn Baker from Southern Illinois. Thank you guys for joining this evening. So it was interesting. Last week, I had like a ton of questions about microprocessor feet and ankles. And I was like, bobbing and weaving, trying to answer everybody's questions because there's so many great options out there on the market. This week, we're going to the other side of amputee recovery. Instead of prosthetic devices, I've gotten a lot of questions from the rehab side of things, which is kind of my bread and butter. So Michelle, speaking of PTs, great PTs coming down the pike. This girl's got great things ahead of her. We got Haravamsh. So good for you to join us, Haravamsh. I'm so glad to see you. So I have a smattering of clinicians who join in on the show from time to time. I have prosthetists that jump in. I have physical therapists that come into the show every once in a while, and I love seeing colleagues on the show and interacting with them. And I actually had a physical therapist send me a couple of questions. And guys, for those of you who are watching, I love working with fellow colleagues who are trying to troubleshoot with their amputee patients, especially if they're not necessarily amputee specialists. So that's also part of what I do. I am always answering questions on my email and on my message and Facebook from you all as viewers, but also from clinicians. Hey, Judah, you're back. Haven't seen you in a while. I'm so glad you're here. Hello, Chris from cold Iowa. I can only imagine, Chris, because even in Florida, it's like 40 degrees. So Iowa must be like, all right. So let's go ahead and get started. These questions, like I said, were being asked by a physical therapist. She has a complicated patient, amputee patient, and she just wanted to kind of troubleshoot some things with me. And I'm happy to do this. So this particular therapist is a specialist actually in neurological conditions and disorders, okay? But she also happens to see amputee patients on her census. And guys, as physical therapists, this happens a lot. Most of us have our specialties that we prefer to work in. In my case, I loved working in burn trauma units, wound care, and I decided to obviously narrow my niche into amputee specialty. But we have so many different specialties in my profession, but we still treat from all the other different specialties. It's kind of what I love about my profession. It's never boring, right? So this particular therapist says she has a younger man in his 30s who unfortunately had sepsis, and he lost both legs, and he also lost function of his hands. He still has his hands, but not very functional. And he's only able to put weight on his elbows and his forearms. So right now they're in the early stages of the rehab process, and they're working to see about helping him get from sit to stand position. This is one of the very early skills that we practice in functional mobility and physical therapy. And many of you probably also went through something like this, learning just the basics, learning how to sit, learning how to stand again in those early rehab days of yours, okay? But for this young man, obviously it's a little more complicated because he can't really use his hands to push from the chair. How many of you guys, when you guys were first learning how to stand up again after your amputation, think about how much pressure you would put on your arms to get you up and moving, right? Even with my own patients, I'd say to them a lot of times as they're getting their feet back, getting their sea legs back, to help use their arms to get them up into standing. Okay. So when you have a slightly more complicated patient, you got to get creative as a physical therapist. So we have a device called a platform walker. Okay. And it's a walker. It's your basic average walker. And then it has two little armrests that are attached to it, and it allows the person to put weight, and they rest on it like this. So they look like they're kind of holding a steering wheel, okay? And they hold on, and then that way they can put the weight through their elbow and also through the top part of their arm, through their humerus, okay? But the question is, how do they get up into standing to be able to hold on to those platforms, right? That's kind of the tricky part as a therapist. So we're going to talk a little bit about how the body works and how the body moves. And hopefully this might give you guys, whoops, there goes Bob, he just slid down. Hopefully it'll give you guys some light bulb moments. And maybe if some of you are having trouble also with some of your mobility, you might go, oh, this might help. Okay. So let's go. Okay, Bob, you're going to have to cooperate tonight. Yeah, you'll get your royalty checks later. All right, guys, everybody say hi to Bob. Those of you who have seen my show, you guys know that Bob is no stranger to this show. He is my reluctant model that I like to use at times, courtesy of one of my viewers who sent this to me. Thank you again, Doug. Okay, so we're going to take a look over here at Bob's hip bones right here, right? If you put your hands on your hips, this is the part of the bone that you're feeling when you put your hands on the front part of your hips. It's called your ASIS, okay? So our pelvis moves in several different directions, okay? It can tilt forward. It can tilt backwards. We call forward tilting, anterior tilting, and posterior tilting. And then from the side, let's see if you can guys see it from the side, okay? So anterior tilting and posterior tilting. And you can see that it moves independently of the hip joint, right? Our bodies move in all sorts of combination of ways, okay? And I do have a caveat to say about that. Everybody's saying hi to Bob. Hey, Bob, time to, Stephen, are you doing a Bob drinking game? Every time I say the word Bob, you have to take a drink. That's only for Stephen. Okay, so guys, the way our body moves, it's kind of a combination of movements. Okay, so take your hand, for example. If you want to grip something, right, you close your hand like this, and it's a combination of this joint, and this joint, all combining the movements to work together, right? If you only had movement at one joint, then you'd only be able to do this and do like a really funky little bye-bye movement, okay? But in order to get the full movement that you need to grasp something, right? This joint, and this joint all have to work together, right? So with every movement that we do, it's a combination of much smaller movements. With me so far? Okay. So what happens when the body is injured? Body goes into kind of like spasm mode, right? Body wants to protect itself to prevent more injury. It wants to prevent pain, right? So we freeze and we lose all these tiny little movements. And that's why movement in general, walking, whether it's walking, standing, becomes so much more difficult. All right. Is this good? Am I having any light bulb moments here with people? Is this kind of making sense? If this is making sense, give me a thumbs up, say, hey, Bob, or just put something in the comment section. Okay. So when it comes to standing, and I'm going to adjust my camera here so you guys can get a sneak peek at Bob. Let's see if we can make this happen. Okay. So in the case of standing, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of different small movements in our body to get us up into the standing position, right? It even starts at the head, right? The head starts to move forward, okay? And as you can see, there's some movement here at the hips bending forward, okay? And as the feet are planted down, right? All these tiny little movements, okay? So with amputation, one of the things that happens is a lot of the hip movements, those small anterior and posterior pelvic movements are lost, okay? And this is something that as therapists, we try to get back to our patients, okay? So one thing that the therapist was telling me was that when her patient tried standing up, basically it was just like a jerky movement forward and his heels would come off the floor and he couldn't stabilize and it was really hard for him to stand up and he can't use his hands. Okay. So for the therapist who's listening in right now, listening to this, start working on anterior tilting. Okay. So remember what I said about anterior tilting. Your pelvis moves forward and your pelvis moves backward. Okay. And it moves independently, right, of the hip joint. So if we can get that small, tiny movement going, that's going to set you up. That's your foundation right here towards standing up. Okay. And for my PTs who work with neurological patients, who work with pediatric patients, this is something that we do a lot. It's called neurodevelopmental technique. It's kind of cool. It's NDT. It's this great manual technique that physical therapists who are neurological specialists, they have this wonderful manual technique on how to teach patients to go through these movements, how to activate those muscles, okay? So to my physical therapist out there who's the neurological therapist, use those techniques to help your patient. Help your patient go into anterior tilting. Hang on, let me position the camera again. Thanks for bearing with me, guys. Into anterior pelvic tilting right here so that when he stands up, it's a much smoother motion. Okay, does that make sense? And guys, when it comes to pelvic movement, stay, Bob. Let me readjust the camera. I know, right, Mark? Bob is finally earning his keep. Hey, Kay, I'm so glad you could make it. Oh, guys, thank you so much for the thumbs up and for the light bulb comments. It helps me know. William, thank you for watching on YouTube. I appreciate that. All right. So guys, I know I'm kind of getting into the weeds a little bit with all of this talk about movement. So I'm just going to give you a quick recap, okay? The motion of sit to stand, okay? It's a combination of a lot of different movements in all the joints in your body, okay? And every joint has to play its part. Otherwise, it's going to be a very jerky movement. It's going to be very inefficient. It's going to cost you a lot of energy to try to stand up, especially if you're someone like our gentleman patient here who doesn't have the use of his hands right now to help him out. Okay, so breaking down these movements and a lot of times starting with movement at the hips, at the pelvis can help with this. Okay, so here's an exercise to help. Oh yeah, We're busting out the basketball tonight. All right, guys, how many of you have seen those Swiss balls? Some people call them Swiss balls, some people call them yoga balls, exercise balls. It's like those big old bouncy balls that you see in all the gyms nowadays. Okay, well, this is Bob's Swiss ball. Proportionally speaking, today, you know, as I was planning for the show, I was trying to think, okay, how can I demonstrate this exercise? Because it's hard to fit into this frame. A giant Swiss ball and Bob, and trying to demonstrate what I'm trying to do. Here we go. So we're going to try this. Bear with me again, guys. Move the camera. Okay, can y'all see okay? Can y'all, like, we're good? Okay, so if we're going to pretend this is a giant Swiss ball, and again, I'm speaking also to my therapist out there who's looking to do this, okay, with her patient. This is a 2-person job, and this is something that we do a lot in inpatient rehab because we just have more people available. We have techs available to help with this, get patients to do this particular exercise. And typically we'll do it on one of those big giant mat tables where we have a lot of space to work with, okay? So what I would do, and again, with 2 people, and it takes a little finagling, right? Get your patient into tall kneeling. Okay, can you see that? If your patient is a below the knee amputee bilaterally, this should not be a problem, okay? If your patient is an above the knee amputee on one side, you might have to modify this exercise by putting a bolster underneath the above the knee side, okay? So for this particular exercise, again, we're focusing on hip mobility, and we're also doing glute strengthening. So this is a great exercise. So the person is leaning over the Swiss ball. So in the case of this gentleman, since he can't use his hands, but he can lean on his forearms and elbows, then he can use the forearms and elbows for support. And he's going to simply go back and then squeeze his bottom and go up into tall kneeling. Bob's joints don't want to cooperate too well, okay? It's a very simple exercise. And again, it does require a couple of therapists sometimes to help put a patient into this position. But if you can get the patient into this position, you can really do a lot of strengthening and also working on that hip mobility right here. Because as you can see with Bob's joints, look how much Bob is having to move here to go down and then back up again. And he's doing all that tilting all that tilting motion. And as a bonus, squeezing his non-existent glutes. Okay. So guys, I apologize for the crude demonstration, but this is kind of what I could come up with, and you look really comfortable now, Bob. All right. So is that kind of making sense, guys? Okay. And oftentimes when I'm working with a patient and putting the polish on their gait, especially that final polish, I'm looking to see what parts of their movement when they're walking are missing. Okay. Another big one, and you guys have heard me talk about this on the show before, trunk rotation. Okay. When we are injured, especially if there's an injury close to the center of our bodies, or if it's an above the knee amputation or even below the knee amputation, okay, our bodies go into that freeze mode, right? Trying to walk, and people look like tin soldiers trying to walk with their prosthetic devices. And then they wonder why it's so energy costing. It costs so much energy to walk that way. Okay. So as a physical therapist, we analyze that gait pattern and we look for those tiny micro movements that are missing to start loosening them up to get people to move more fluidly. So trunk rotation. Okay. And there's not a whole lot of trunk rotation involved. I think it's only about 10 degrees. It's not a whole lot of trunk rotation involved when you're walking. But when you don't have those few degrees of motion, it becomes that much harder. I mean, think about it, guys. Those of you who are ambulatory, try that out. Experiment with yourself in the house. Try walking with your arms stuck by your side and not moving your trunk, right? It's hard to do, okay? So when I work with patients, again, trying to break these movement patterns, trying to recreate the fluid movement pattern where we're incorporating all the little joints and all the little movements there. Make sense? Oh, Haravamsh says, help me with some football exercises for above the knee amputees. Now, Haravamsh, are you talking about European football, which was what Americans called soccer? I'm assuming that's what you're referring to. That's kind of funny, Haravamsh. All right, so let's look around. Okay, so there's another one. Okay, here's another great question. This question was also posed by a physical therapist this week. This particular therapist is doing gait training with someone who's at a K2 level and on a knee that has a manual lock. Okay, so it's the kind of knee that you can lock and it'll be locked in extension, meaning the person will just be, the knee will be straight and they can't bend the knee. And the therapist says, the prosthetist wants us working with it unlocked, and I'm having trouble getting my patient to weight shift and maintain that knee extension when they're in mid stance. Okay. So, guys, if you guys have seen my gait video where I break down the gait cycle, okay, Bob, you are really getting a workout tonight. Okay, there's a point that when you take a step, right, your heel hits the floor, your foot goes flat on the floor, and then you move over the foot, right? So there's a part when you're moving over, right about here, we call that mid stance. And as you can see, Bob's knee is pretty much an extension, right? It's a nice straight knee, okay? So when you purposely lock the knee in extension, you're interrupting the gait cycle, okay? You're making it very awkward, very energy inefficient to walk forward, okay? Now, why would someone do this? Why would a therapist decide to manually lock the knee in extension, okay? In some cases, for example, if we have a patient who is very unstable, a patient who has not walked in a very long time. I'm thinking of my current patient right now. He hadn't walked in 5 years. Okay. So those first times standing up were pretty precarious. Okay. Or perhaps a very elderly patient that doesn't have the strength and stability to really control that leg. Then in those cases, we might put that manual lock into the knee so that the person can stand and pivot and transfer in a safe way and allow them to have that mobility. And in some cases, we might teach a patient how to walk with their knee in extension because that is the only way they're going to be safe. Okay. Now, if you have a patient, and I'm speaking, I'm speaking to you all as to the therapist, but again, this also can apply to you in your life. Okay. If you have a patient who has a lot of weakness and they are not stable, okay, you need to break it down into the basics. And I'm speaking to my neurological specialist physical therapy. In some ways, when you work with an amputee, sometimes there are similarities to working with someone who's had a stroke. Okay. Bear with me on this one, guys. Okay. When a person's had a stroke, particularly one that gives them paralysis on one side of their body, right? Their arm is floppy, their leg is floppy, and they have no control over their leg. And in some ways, it's kind of similar to a person who receives a prosthesis for the first time. In fact, a lot of the techniques I used when I work on stroke patients, I use them on my amputee patients because of this similarity. And when you have someone who's had a stroke and a lot of weakness on that leg, the knee buckling is a big problem when they're walking. The knee going into hyperextension, meaning it's straightening out way too much and stressing out the knee joint, that's also another problem that you can see. Okay, so if you have the skills to treat a patient with a stroke, then you also will have the skills to treat a patient with an amputation. How do you start with a stroke patient? You start very small with weight shifts, okay? And you control their knee to make sure their knee is not buckling and to make sure that their knee is not going the other way, hyperextension. Right? So as a therapist, we have those techniques. Okay. So if you are someone who's experiencing a lot of instability there, okay, start with the foundations, weight shifting in the parallel bars where the patient can be safe in a controlled environment. And I have some videos in the Mission Gate channel. Let's see, I can put it up here. Guys, if you go to YouTube, and you go to the Mission Gate channel, there's a couple of videos of me there doing the foundational exercises. Okay. So a lot of times, if we think a patient will be able to walk without having the knee in extension, and that's ideally what we want to happen, you got to start with the basics. You got to start with the weight shifting. And then as a therapist, if you're just like, there's still something not right here, the person keeps buckling or I can't get them to move out, look at the alignment. Look at the alignment and have the prosthetist also look at the alignment. Patients change on a day-to-day basis, and the prosthesis needs to be tweaked and fine-tuned until you get just the right alignment. So if you're having trouble with that, call the prosthetist in and have them take a look and see if there's anything about their alignment that could also be contributing to that instability. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah? All right, let's see what some of these comments are. Guys, feel free to throw in some of these questions here. Charles says, Coasty on the technique mode of this hip exercise. I'm a BK with only 9 inches of leg below the knee. Should I keep my leg on or may I remove my leg to kneel so deeply on my glutes? Charles, it's up to you, your comfort level. Whenever I'm working with a patient, especially with my below the knee amputees, I try to do the exercises first with the leg on. And if it's not comfortable for them, then we take the leg off and we modify the exercise. As a below the knee, if you're trying that exercise that I was doing earlier, where we had Bob kneeling down. Okay. The part where Bob is kneeling down, as a below the knee amputee, you should be able to do this fairly comfortably. You might need a little padding underneath your knee if you're having any issues with arthritis there, okay? But a lot of these exercises can be modified. And I'll give you guys another little hint about this big project I've been talking about. It involves modifying a lot of exercises. And I'm gonna stop there with that hint. All right, Trent says, hey, Cozy, I was talking with my prosthetist telling her about you and what you do. Thank you so much, Trent. If I have any literature, brochure, business cards, or anything like that, oh, that's so kind. She works for Hanger Clinic. Actually, Trent, thank you so much for helping me spread the word, guys. And guys, I'm a mom and pop show, word of mouth. So I appreciate it when you guys share the news of what I'm doing with your prosthetist and also your fellow amputees. So Trent, best way for your prosthetist is just have her reach out to me. I've had several prosthetists and several physical therapists from around the country reach out to me to connect with me. And I'm always happy to schedule a call and talk to them and chit chat. I don't have any literature or brochures or business cards yet. I'm a terrible businesswoman. I know. I need to put that together. But in the meantime, she is more than welcome to contact me. And I'd love to set up a time to chat with her. So Trent, thank you so much again for that connection. All right, guys. Harsh, there you are. Hey, David. We've got Jamar Brothers on board. Andrea, there's my girl. There's my OT right there. Glad you could make it. All right, guys, let's see what else. Guys, start going to put in on your questions. There weren't too many questions this week that came in, so feel free to put some questions up there, and it'll be open season on the PT. Oh, Harsh, thank you so much. I did meet Harsh at the Mission Gate. And guys, Mission Gate is a wonderful organization in Virginia, run by a physical therapist, and they have a phenomenal team. And the content that they put out on their YouTube channel is fantastic. I would highly encourage you to visit their YouTube channel. So Charles says, I wear an elevated vacuum socket with a liner that seals all the way up my thigh. So again, Charles, experiment. If you find that you're having trouble maintaining suspension while you're in the kneeling position to do this exercise, then remove the leg and you can do it without the leg on. And guys, there's several exercises. Again, I just think probably my favorite exercise is the bridging exercise. And you know what? We're going to put Bob to work again. Let's just do a quick demonstration of what I mean by bridging. It's my favorite exercise that all of the people who come through my clinic, they'll get some sort of variation of this exercise because there's so much that you can do. So for the bridging exercise, the person is lying. This looks so funny. Okay, here we go. We're going to have to work on this technology, and one day maybe I'll be able to have a live model on the show while I'm doing these exercises. Okay, so the basic bridging exercise looks like this, where the person is with their feet flat on the surface, and then they lift up their bottom. Can you guys see that? They lift up their bottom from the floor, okay? And in doing so, they're activating their core muscles. They're activating those glute muscles. It's a really fantastic strengthening exercise. And like I said, I modify it for everybody who comes through my clinic. With my below the knee amputees, I typically do it just like this, okay? I leave their prosthesis on and I have them lift up their bottom from the mat and do it just like that. For my above the knee amputees, depending on their level, for some amputees, above the knee amputees, if they have a longer residual limb, we can leave the prosthesis on and they can activate those glutes and they can use their prosthesis to kind of give them a little leverage as they lift up their hips from the mat, okay? If the person is having trouble, here, we're going to pretend that Bob is an above the knee amputee. Okay. I'll put their residual limb up on a ball. So pretend this is one of those Swiss balls, and then they can do the exercise by lifting up their hips as well. Okay. So guys, when it comes to exercise and therapeutic exercise and physical therapists, we are really good at coming up with a lot of modified and adaptive ways to do these exercises for all levels of patients, all levels of functional mobility. Okay, it's kind of our thing. All right, Stephen says, stability. Sometimes I use a cane when I go to the city for safety. My PT tells me to use on the opposite side of my right AK. It's illogical to me. And Stephen, I know it's illogical, but that's how the weight distribution works. Okay, if you're using a single-handed device like a cane, like a single crutch, okay, you're going to use it on the opposite side of your amputation. So Stephen, in your case, if you are a right above the knee amputee, okay, right side, you're going to carry your cane on the left side. And a lot of times my patients are looking at me going, is she crazy? Is she crazy? And then I have them try it the opposite way and then they understand why. Okay. So when you have it on the opposite hand, basically that hand is taking some of the weight off your prosthesis. It's providing you that bridge. Think of it as a bridge, Stephen. Okay. If you were to put the cane on the same side, it's actually going to force you to put more weight onto the prosthetic side, and it's also going to provide less balance. So think about it, Stephen. If you put it on the same side as your amputation, right, it's going to be right there. It's not giving you a big old base of support that you need. Have you guys ever watched that show House? Who here? I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of Sherlock Holmes and any kind of TV shows that are like Sherlock Holmes. I know I've got another Sherlock Holmes fan here on board. How many of you guys used to watch that show House? Right? Raise your hand. Well, raise your hand in the comments section. I know I've got to have some other people here who watch House. I'm not the only one. All right. So those of you who watched House, it's the story of this brilliant doctor who figures out these crazy cases and using kind of Sherlock Holmes genius. Fascinates me. I love that show. And he had an injury to his leg. It's a very debilitating injury that he had to his leg. And he would use the cane on the same side as the injury. It drove me bonkers. It drove me bonkers to see that because he was using it on the wrong side. And when you would see him walk, he would have this horrific gait deviation, this really obvious limp because that cane wasn't doing squat for him. Okay. So if you want to see an example as to why it doesn't work when you use a cane on the same side as your amputation, watch an episode of House. There we go. And guys, sometimes I'll do that. Sometimes when my patients are just, they can't understand why, I'll have them try to walk with the cane on the same side as their amputation and they'll go, oh, wait, this is not helping me at all. All right. So Kay says, my husband rigged up some parallel bars on our screen porch. Very nice. Very helpful. I agree, Kay. I'm an AK, still trying to walk on my own 1 year after amputations, and your exercise and videos are incredible. Thank you so much, Kay. And Kay, this is something I'm really hoping I can bring forward sometime next year and helping a little bit more with that. I'm giving you guys a lot of hints today. So Charles says, I have bunching of my liner behind the knee. And Charles, I run into that, especially with my below the knee amputees, when we're doing any exercises like the bridging, like kneeling, where that liner tends to bunch up behind. So again, I try to modify things as best as I can with my patients to make them as comfortable as possible. So depending on the exercise, I might just roll the liner down just a little bit so that to give them a little bit more freedom of movement with the knee. In your case, it would mean that you might lose some of that suction with your elevated vacuum. But again, for an exercise where you're staying still and just rolling down that liner might give you that freedom there in the back of your knee so you don't get any chafing on the back of your knee. No, Mark, I haven't read your text yet. Right? You love that show, Bar? I love that show. It was a good show. Right, Stephen. So again, when you're using your cane on the opposite side of your amputation, that cane is taking a part of the weight away from your prosthesis. So it's assisting you in that regard. It's also providing, like I said, a bridge, meaning a larger base of support to help with the balance side of it. Okay. All right, guys. Hey, Les. Oh my gosh, glad you could join. All right, guys, I'm trying to scrunch through here, make sure I didn't miss any of the questions. Guys, don't be shy. Let me know. So guys, as I'm waiting to see, I'll wait a few more minutes to see if you guys have any questions, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I'll be doing with my YouTube channel. And this is just kind of from taking feedback from all of you during the year as to what you like to see on the show. And I'm going to take a little COSI poll in just a minute. I'm going to start what's called 2-minute chats. Okay. So on my YouTube channel, you're going to start to see little videos, and they're going to be titled 2-minute chats, and they're going to be on all sorts of topics. So proprioception, phantom pain, liner hygiene, prosthetic feet, gait cycle, muscle strengthening, right? And it's just going to be a quick 2-minute video on a particular topic. And then in that video, I'm going to link for you other videos with more information. And the reason why I'm kind of doing that is because I know, like, when I watch YouTube channels, I have a couple of favorite YouTube channels. I really like the ones where it's easy to find the information I'm looking for. Right? You know, you go to YouTube and sometimes these channels, they have really great videos, but you want to find that one video, and it's really, really hard to find that one video, and you have to scroll through 50 different videos to find the one that you're looking for. So I'm kind of hoping to streamline all of that. And what I need to know from you guys here, and I want to see some comments in the comment section, what topics do you want to hear about? I have like 3 pages worth of topics and ideas for topics, but I want to make sure I'm talking about what you guys want to learn more about. So I want to see some in the comments section. What do you want to hear about? Okay. And then the other thing I'm going to be starting this year on the COSI, on the YouTube channel, is the Ask COSI segment. Okay. So I've saved, guys, all the questions that you guys have asked me for the past 2.5, 3 years on the show. I have a big old binder full of these questions. And what I'm going to start doing is doing video answers to these questions. And again, linking them so that it's easy to find information. So that if you guys are wanting to know what are my talks on phantom limb pain, there's going to be one video that links you to all the videos I've done on phantom limb pain to make it easy for you guys. Okay. So guys, let me know topics. What are the topics that you want to hear about? Oh, Judah, you're funny. He says, Judah, welcome to Hollywood, the world of make-believe. Very annoying. I would write to the producer to see what reaction you get. You know what, Judah? It's really funny. There was one episode on House, right, where he's working with a physical therapist who's trying to teach him to change the cane to the correct side. I was like, that has to be, that's the tongue-in-cheek humor right there. And the whole episode, you see this frazzled physical therapist running after him, trying to get him to change the cane to the other side. And he does it for a little while. And then at the end of the episode, he goes, eh, and he goes back to using it on the wrong side. And I was just like, the pain is real. The struggle is real. There you go. Thomas says, I'm a right below the knee amputee, and I'm wearing a walking brace boot on the left. Hopefully I'll walk with a brace and a regular shoe. What side would I use a cane? That's a really great question, Thomas. So in your case, you have some involvement in both legs, okay? So Thomas, you're going to have one leg that's stronger, one leg that's more dependable, and it might be the side that your prosthesis is on. So if your right below the knee amputated side is your stronger side, then you're going to be using your cane on the right side. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, okay? And I should rephrase that. Let me rephrase that. Rewind. Thomas, if your weak side, your weaker side is the left side, then you're going to use the cane on the right. If it turns out that your right side with the prosthesis is weaker, you're going to use the cane on the left. Yes? Thumbs up, Thomas? Hang on, let me make sure I didn't do that. Okay. Hey, Kevin. Oh, Kevin, you're on board. Awesome. Steven says, what platform is best for COSI to have views on? I log on to Facebook and YouTube tonight on different. Oh, Steven, thank you so much for doing that. Guys, just everywhere. Those of you who are familiar with social media, basically the different social media platforms kind of feed into each other. And what I've gotten feedback from my viewers over the past year and a half is that there's a lot of folks out there that obviously are not on Facebook, or they're not as comfortable maneuvering around social media. So I found a program that allows me to go to YouTube as well, which is a little bit easier to access. So I appreciate, guys, clothing hacks. Andrea, thank you. That's my occupational therapist right there, reminding the PT that we got to do clothing hacks. Andrea, thank you so much for that one. I like that one. I am writing that down, guys. I want to hear your ideas as to what topics you guys want me to talk about on the future 2-minute chats on the YouTube channel. Kay says, I have done bridges on my back on the bed, but know it would be better on the floor. Getting up on my own from the floor is scary. Any suggestions? Kay, if you can do it on your bed comfortably, then just stay on your bed. And I agree, guys, if the ability to get on and off the floor, I think, is a valuable tool to have, especially if you are an amputee, just because there will come a point in time that you will fall down. It's gonna happen, guys, okay? So to know how to get up again safely is a valuable tool. Now, that being said, learning to do this is something that you kind of need the help of a physical therapist to do so that they can guide you safely through those motions. Okay, so that's my little soapbox on being able to get on and off the floor. Okay, so Kay, if you're not there yet, just remember, keep doing the bridging exercises, and you can modify these bridging exercises to make them more challenging for yourself, Kay. So again, one of the reasons why this is one of my favorite exercises to do. Okay, so Kay, if you're getting good, you're getting a workout tonight. All right, Kay, so let's say you're on your bed, okay, and you're doing your bridging exercise, right? And you're able to go up and down pretty well, and now you're looking for an extra challenge, okay? First thing I have my patients do is I have them go up into the bridge position and hold for the count of 5. And I mean, I have them count out loud, not 1, 2, 3, and then they're back down on 5. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then slowly go back down. And then do it another time and another time. And after they do that for 10 times, they're feeling it, okay? So, Kay, there are ways that you can modify this particular exercise to make it more challenging for yourself, because I know that sometimes on a bed, it's not going to be as challenging as when you're on a firm surface, okay? Another thing that I saw once, I worked several years in the home health setting, Kay, and again, you got to get creative as a therapist. I had one patient that for his wife, he actually put a big piece of plywood on their bed because she couldn't get on and off the floor. And in order to make the bed a firm surface, whenever she wanted to do her exercise, he would put a very thin sheet of plywood on the bed. It was huge. It was huge. And that would be how she did her exercises. So it's a little outlandish, a little thinking outside the box, but it worked. Okay. All right, here we go. We got some questions coming in. Oh, thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. Clothing for men with below the knee prosthetics. Daryl, I like that. I'm writing that down. Clothing with men for below the knee. Okay. And, oh, Judah, you remember the episode? Man, you're good, Judah. Justine says, I second that. Thanks for some of the ideas for my young bilateral amputee. That's actually simple and easy for me to implement, even with my future amps. Justine, I'm so glad that you're listening on this evening. And thank you for taking such an interest in your patient to do this. And again, Justine, I have a sneaking suspicion that you probably are in the inpatient rehab setting. So as challenging as it is to get someone into that position with the Swiss ball, if you have that kind of a large mat table and you can use a tech to help you get that patient into that tall kneeling position, it will help a lot with the hip mobility, hopefully, and also with those glute strength. Cozy time for a book with all those questions. Jess, oh, hey, Jess. So Jess says, hello, bilateral at knee and through the knee. Okay, 1986 amputation resulting from meningitis. I've been able to choose my height, and yesterday at a wheelchair fitting appointment was told my legs are very long. I'm currently 5'8", wondering the benefit of making myself even 1 inch shorter. My height was based off of the arm length. Just curious of your thoughts. I have had over 34 years of experience as a bilateral amputee and will be getting a wheelchair for in-home ambulation. Jess, that's a really interesting question. And I do run into this every once in a while with my bilateral below the knee and bilateral above the knee, where they get to really choose their height. And one of the people that first comes to mind is Reggie Showers. Reggie Showers is a buddy of mine. He works very closely with College Park Industries, and he's no stranger to this show. He's been on the show several times. And Reggie is a bilateral below the knee amputee, and he became an amputee at a very young age due to an electrocution accident. So long story short, Reggie is a 2-time, let me make sure I get this right, world champion motorcycle racer, right? And I hope I said that correctly. Two-time world champion. And I know in Reggie, when he and I were chit-chatting, he would say that when he was racing on the motorcycles, he would use a shorter prosthesis because it would allow him to sit better in the motorcycle itself. And these motorcycles are like Mach 3 fast. So he needed to have a very close fit. And then, you know, he'd walk back out after the race and he'd be back to his normal height. He's I think 5'10", 5'11", I believe. He's a bit taller than I am. Okay, so as a bilateral, you do have those choices. Now, obviously, you want to be close to what would have been your normal anatomical height. But Jess, for someone like yourself who's been an amputee for so many years and you are so experienced at what works for your body, if you were to go down 1 inch, you would have some adjustment period, obviously, because there is a little bit of a change in height. But I think you would do just fine if you're, and again, I don't know your case very well. I don't know how much walking you do with your prosthetic devices, but if you're someone who's been able to walk successfully with both prosthesis, lowering them down by 1 inch, if it's going to make your life easier when you're using the wheelchair, I say go for it. Worst case scenario, Jess, your prosthetist can just give you back that 1 inch, right? I'd love to know a little bit more, Jess, about your case. Let's see. Linda says plywood is a great idea. It was incredible. It was, you know, because where I live, there's a lot of rural area. So a lot of the patients I would see in home health, you know, they would have barns in their backyard and they had a lot of farm equipment and they had a lot of carpentry in their backyard. So like I said, this patient, her husband just put together this huge sheet of plywood, managed to get it into their room and on top of their bed, and we had a firm surface that we could work on. We just had to be careful with the splinters. So let's see. Thank you, Kevin. Another topic for me, sockets with corresponding liners. Yep, I've been doing that when I got that one with corresponding liners. I'm writing this down, guys, so I don't forget. Or vice versa. I don't think I've seen you cover that. Just a thought. And Kevin, I have covered liners a lot, and I've covered different socket shapes, but I think I need to do that one again. Rhonda, clothing, adaptive clothing for women below the knee. Excellent. Different sockets and liners. Okay, so that one's definitely a popular one. Different sockets. And guys, thank you for reminding me. I haven't done a show on sockets in a while. It's been well over a year. Jamar says balancing on your prosthesis. Okay. How to know if you have the correct height with the above the knee prosthetic. Oh, that's a good one. I like that one, Jamar. Okay. Correct height. And actually, Jamar, I'm going to answer that one for you right now because we have Bob right here. So I'm going to give you a really quick and dirty tutorial on how I look for height when it comes to my new patients. So when my patients come in, especially for the first time to my clinic, one of the very first things I check with their alignment is their height. Now, why is a physical therapist checking the alignment on a prosthesis? Because a lot of things can change, guys, right? Even in a patient who's not an amputee, I'm looking at a person's alignment. I'll look at their posture. You know, do they have any kind of a scoliosis going on in their spine? Are their hips level? Okay. These are all things I look for in my patients who have 2 anatomical legs. So of course I'm going to look for this in a patient who comes in with a prosthesis. And the other reason for that is if a person went to see their prosthetist 4 days before they came to see me, a lot of things can happen in those 4 days, especially if they're new to wearing a prosthesis. Things are constantly changing. And I know that the prosthetists that I work with, they appreciate that kind of feedback because they know that I'm going to see certain things in the clinic that perhaps they don't see in their clinic. Things change, right? So I'll have a person stand up in a square up position. And let me see if you guys can see his feet. Okay, so Bob here is demonstrating a nice square up position where he's got his feet 4 to 6 inches apart. And the toes are nice and even. So this is the regular standing position, not way out here. It's actually kind of close in together. Okay. And I'm standing behind the patient and I'm going to look at their hips, right? I'm going to see, starting over here, are their hips level? Okay. And if their hips are level, then I'm going to look at the back of their knees, including if one of them has a prosthetic knee, I'll look to see, is that level or not? Okay. And then I continue to look up the spine as well. I'm going to see, okay, are the shoulders level or are they not level, meaning that they could have some sort of scoliosis or something else going on. Then I'll turn around and have the patient face me. Okay. And I'll look to see once again from the front, how do their hips look? And there's a couple of different marks on the hips that I'll be looking at to see, because the hips can kind of rotate on their own. So if something is uneven, it could be coming from the hips. Okay. So if I've seen that everything is good and kosher with all the alignment with the person's body, and there's still a discrepancy in the height, then I'm going to start to call the prosthetist and say, hey, I think there's something going on with the height of the prosthesis. Okay. So that's just the quick and dirty on that one, Jamar. And then we go from there. We troubleshoot with the prosthetist from there. All right. I'm going to see one or two more messages here. Ooh, that's a good one, Chris. At home emergency prosthetic adjustments. I like that one. At home emergency prosthetic, writing as fast as I can, adjustments. Okay. Stephen says, should I still be using my original socket 14 months out? It's not comfortable. I get the feeling my provider does not want to change due to warranty. Oh, golly, I hate it when that happens. And I had someone mention that to me this week, that their patient was in 17 ply in their socket, and they were trying to convince the prosthetist to change the socket. Okay. So guys, when it comes to sockets, it's kind of a simple equation. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay. I've had patients who've had the same socket for years, right? Because it just fits comfortably. They're nice and stable with their volume, and it works fine. Not very often, but that can happen. When a socket becomes uncomfortable, that's when you need to start the communication process. So if the socket is becoming uncomfortable because you're having to add on a ton of socks, okay, and you're losing that connection with the socket, you're losing that sense of proprioception of knowing where your foot is in space, it's time to talk a new socket, okay? And guys, I am by no means an expert when it comes to insurance and approvals and all that kind of fun stuff, but I do know that your socket is a medical necessity. And if it's not fitting properly, then your prosthetist can justify a new socket to your insurance provider. The knee componentry and the foot, that's a different story. But when it comes to the socket itself, that is something that has to be changed as you change as well. Otherwise, you're going to run the risk of skin breakdown or not using your prosthesis because it's not comfortable. Okay. What to use and not to use to clean liners and socket with. That's a favorite of mine, Linda, and I definitely have that one on my list. Liner hygiene and how to take care of those liners. Yeah, some of that does come from the insurance, Chris, but that's one of those things where I'm just like, no, you need to keep taking that back to the insurance when it comes to changing the socket. When it comes to changing the knee components and like I said, the foot, that can be a little bit trickier, especially if you're still within that window period of the foot or the knee. But when it comes to changing a socket, guys, and again, I work with a few prosthetists in this area, very good prosthetists. And whenever my patients need a new socket, they have a pretty easy time getting it approved. And I see people with all different types of coverage. So again, Stephen, I would recommend, call your insurance provider. You can call your insurance provider directly. There's no reason why you can't do that yourself and find out why they're not approving the socket. And here's the thing, Stephen. Sometimes it's because your clinician may not have turned in the proper paperwork. Okay. And this happens, guys. Clinicians are humans. So Stephen, don't be shy about advocating for yourself. Pick up the phone, call your insurance provider and ask, why am I getting denied for a new socket? And when I've had one or two incidences in the past few months where a viewer called their insurance company and it turns out that their clinician hadn't turned in the right paperwork. So just kind of, putting that out there for you. Stephen, you are so sweet. Thank you. Let's see. Mario says, I've averaged a new socket every 1 to 1.5 years as the left above the knee. Guys, let's just do one last quick cozy poll. How many times do you guys get your socket changed on average? Whether you're a beginner amputee or you're an established amputee and you've been using a prosthesis for a while now, how often do you get your socket changed? And this is something I've covered a lot on the show, like when is it appropriate to get the socket changed? You know, the textbook will tell you that when you reach 15 ply, you're wearing 15 ply socks in your socket, it's time to get a new socket. Okay. And like I always say, that's the textbook, but you got to go by how you feel. I have some patients that when they get to 6 or 7 or 8 ply, they're going bonkers and they can't walk well. And we have to get a new socket made for them at 8 ply. And then I have some patients that they're at 15 ply and they're zipping up and down without a problem. Okay, so it goes along with the, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If your socket is comfortable, you're walking fine, keep going as you are. But yeah, if you're not comfortable, time to squeak that wheel. Let's see. Steven says, I haven't changed it yet. Yeah, Steven. Mark says 1.5. So I'm assuming 1.5 years. William says, still on first carbon fiber socket, 1 year old, fits great. Yeah. And to me, it's like, that's kind of like the holy grail, guys. When it comes to all the different parts involved in a prosthesis, the socket to me is the part that requires the most skill on the side of the prosthetist, and also part science, part art. So when you find a prosthetist who can make a comfortable fitting socket, they are worth their price in gold. That's kind of like the holy grail, is the comfortable fitting socket, because that's where it all starts right there. Let's see, Kay says 3 times my first year and my guys are great. And yeah, guys, especially those of you who are in those first year to 2 years after your amputation, your limb is going to be constantly changing. So you're going to be going through sockets. Some of you, I mean, I've had some people, they go through 5 or 6 sockets that first year. And the more active you get, the more you're going to shrink down and the more you're going to have another socket change until things kind of plateau and even out for you. Daryl says 4 years on my present socket and it's only my second one. So Daryl, seems like you've had a pretty good experience. Johnny says at close to 19 years in, not very often. I lost some weight during the pandemic, so it might be time to do that soon. Let's see, Rhonda says it took 3 tries to get my original one right. And guys, that's something, especially for my newer amputees, that I always try to make sure that they understand. It's a frustrating process to have to keep going back to get these sockets done. But that is part of the normal process. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean your prosthetist is doing anything wrong. It just means that your body is changing and healing and adapting. And that's how it goes for a little while. Robin says 5 years as a BK, second socket and no socks. That is awesome, Robin. That is awesome. Jim says 4 times in 6 years, but some based on changing attachment type, from lanyard to vacuum and back to lanyard. So again, if your suspension system might change, okay, that also can require a change in socket. Megan says, I'm still on my first one, very uncomfortable from the beginning. He won't listen to me. And guys, that kind of hurts my heart whenever I hear somebody say that their clinician isn't listening to them, whether it's the doctor, the nurse, the physical therapist, or the prosthetist. And guys, you know, discomfort in a socket or pain, it's something that should not be acceptable. Okay, so if you feel like your clinician is not listening to you, get a second opinion. Get a second opinion. Let's see, 5 years is a good time to replace a leg, which could include a socket. And again, I've had, going back to Reggie, actually, he has a socket. He has an amazing prosthetist. His prosthetist is a guy named Mike. And he's had some of his sockets for several years. And he says that they're made out of a material that's pretty much, you know, it's going to last a really long time. And the fit has always been very good. Linda says, little over a year on my second one. All right, guys, this has been a really great evening. I really love these evenings where we have a lot of conversation, a lot of interaction here. Guys, thank you so much for all of your input. I appreciate those of you who are helping spread the word about my show and about the different platforms. Truly appreciate that. Thank you so much. And thank you guys again for the input on the 2-minute chats. You guys hear of any other topics that you want me to talk about, you know how to reach me. You can reach me on Facebook, Instagram, my email, my website. Yeah, I'm out there. I'm everywhere. So guys, if you haven't already done so, please consider following me on my YouTube channel and also on my Instagram. I'm under Cosi Talks. And I do have an email subscription. I'm going to charge that up again now for the new year. And you can sign up for that through my website. All right, guys, I am going to go ahead and sign off for now, but I do want to say thank you again for letting me be a part of your lives this evening. If I missed your question, please don't be shy. Send it to me on one of my platforms and I'll be happy to answer it for you. All right, guys, I will see you same bat time, same bat channel next week. God bless.